This is America. He's got the best head of hair in podcasting. This is America with Rich Valdes.
All right, New York, welcome back. I am Rich Valdes, and you were just listening to a cut of Mayor Bill de Blasio. Now, Mayor Bill de Blasio has been coming under fire mainly because he really lacks a lot of intellect. But apart from that, he's really been lopsided with a lot of things. He's talking about Black Lives Matter, and I don't necessarily want to talk about Black Lives Matter. I want to talk about what Ashani Mfuko is working on, because she's put together this curriculum on how to not be racist. And I think many of us think, well, I'm not a racist. I don't think I need to go to school for that. But I think when I worked in the government, let me share a thought with you. When I worked in the government in the Christie administration, one of the things that I learned was that there are cultural competencies that some of us are aware of and some of us are not aware of. There are things we know and things that we do not know. So I think with respect to that, it's always good to be more culturally aware. And with that respect, I've looked at some of the anti-racist thought process, the definition. I've once read passages of Dr. Kendi, Professor Kendi's book on anti-racism. And there were parts that I agreed with and parts that I critiqued because I just didn't agree. I thought they were beyond the pale. But the point that I think we all settle on is racism is bad. It's not cool to not like Puerto Ricans. It's not cool to not like Africans. It's not cool to like black Puerto Ricans, like Bruce, Get Loose Bruce behind the board, or Jenny from the Block who's Mexican. That's not cool to be racist. And there are people, and I know them. I've spoken and met people that will say, I don't like that guy because he's, I don't dislike him because he's black. I just dislike him because he's a N-word. And I'm like, what? Or I once met somebody from West Virginia who literally told me, he's like, look, man, I'm not a racist. I'm not my family. So my granddaddy was a racist. But me, listen, some of the best workers I've ever had were N-words. And I was like, oh, snap. I mean, it was just, he didn't think he was a racist. So, and again, maybe he doesn't hate people. He just uses these racial slurs flippantly. So I think there is space to have a conversation, not a debate, right? If you want to have a debate with me, call me on the phone. I'm happy to give you a piece of my mind. But right now, Ashani Mfuko, welcome to This is America on 77 Talk Radio WABC.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, Rich. Thanks for having me.
What I want to know, we set it up about cultural competence and things of that nature. I guess in a couple of minutes, tell us what the project you're working on is called and what your goal is.
Okay. So I am the founder of Anti-Racism School is in Session, and it is an educational training series that illuminates issues around racism. It's there to educate and inform people about how to be anti-racist, because it's not enough to just say, I'm not a racist. You need to be anti-racist. All right.
I love that because, again, examples I just made. I think a lot of us, myself included, I don't consider myself to be a racist, but I don't think I even need to call myself an anti-racist because I just think it's an extra step that I would think is unnecessary. But I do think there is a need for it somewhere. Right. So help us understand what being an anti-racist is about, or what anti-racist school is in session is all about.
Okay, so being anti-racist, first of all, is all about proactively dismantling systemic racism. So you're saying, I'm not just going to say, hey, I'm not racist, but you're saying I am going to tear down this system that has been in place for hundreds of years that have caused oppression to black people in America. So that's what really being anti-racist is all about. Okay.
And as a point of, I guess, difference of opinion, I personally believe, at least in my experience in life, I have never witnessed or felt any systemic racism. I have had people throw something at me and yell anti-Latino slurs, but it wasn't a system that promoted that. It wasn't, I'm in talk radio, right? This was once all predominantly white men.
Yes.
I tend to believe that systemic racism is not so much of the thing as much as a white majority. This is a country that was started by white people. There are more white people than there are the rest of us. But I don't feel like them existing limits my ability. Old saying, what I eat, won't make you fat, right? So the fact that they're white doesn't diminish my opportunity. But with that being said, whether or not we agree on the fact that there may or may not be systemic racism, what are the tools that you would use to get at somebody to help them be more aware?
So the first thing is that you have to understand that everyone has implicit bias or unconscious bias, right?
Yeah.
We all have that. So you have to start by looking at yourself and dissecting, how do I feel about black people? Let's get real. How do you really feel about black people? What, and not just, oh, well, I think they're cool. Like you said, you know, the guy said, oh, they've been some of my best workers. Like that, okay, we need to dig a little bit deeper. How do you feel when you see them? What's your response when you see on the news that another unarmed black person has been killed by the police? What's your first response? Is it to say, oh, well, they were probably, you know, doing something illegal.
They should have stopped resisting.
They should have stopped resisting.
I hear that a lot, and honestly, I don't always agree with that.
Right. So you have to look at yourself and say, what are the implicit biases that I have within myself? And that's a difficult thing to do. That's why I created Anti-Racism School is in Session, because you need help in really kind of dissecting that within yourself, because you don't see it. So even for someone to say, hey, I'm not racist, well, okay, let's ask some people around you some of the things that you say, some of the words that you use, some of the terms that you use, how you interact with people, right? And the issue with systemic racism, which is a thing, which is real, it is documented. It has historical context. So things like the transatlantic slave trade, things like redlining.
I agree.
All of these things. These are not things that are made up. These are real things.
But I can't say that redlining's a thing today.
Right. Well, what happens is just because the laws change doesn't mean that people's feelings and perceptions about black people also change like the laws, right? The law goes into effect. Oh, now everybody suddenly is like, yay, black people are equal. No, however, that's not the case.
If we've changed the system, that doesn't mean we'll change the people.
Right.
So and this is why I don't like this term of systemic racism. I feel like you guys own a home. And I don't know if you live in a black neighborhood or white neighborhood, but I've been to your home. It's a lovely home. And I think the system's no longer pegged against us, but people may be. So in a minute or less, wrap it up for us on what the gist of your program is and how we could find it.
Okay, so I just want to say about systemic racism that the people are the ones who run the systems, right? So if the laws changed and the people are still feeling the way that they felt prior to the laws changing and they're running the systems, that tells you all you need to know, right? So that's where there are still issues that need to be dealt with. So in my program, Anti-Racism School is in Session, I am highlighting all of the things that people either say aren't true because they haven't experienced it. So they say, if I haven't experienced it, it's not a problem for me. You know, so it's not an issue, but you need to learn the historical context. You need to learn about your own implicit biases and learn how you can be an ally to black
website?
people. The website is my name, AshaniMfuko.com, and you can learn more. ASHANIMFUKO.com.
All right, folks, that's Ashani Mfuko. I am Rich Valdes. You're listening to This is America, and we'll be back next week.